Do not hang up if you somehow found this video by accident. I know that sounds strange, especially because you don't even know who I am yet, but something happened a few minutes before I pressed record that I still can't believe. My private phone number, the one almost nobody has, may have been exposed. I wasn't planning to tell anyone. I certainly wasn't planning for you to find it. And now I'm sitting here wondering whether this mistake was nothing more than human error, or whether life has a strange way of forcing us toward moments we've been postponing for years. If you are the woman I've been waiting for, then maybe this isn't an accident at all. Maybe this is the first time destiny ignored my carefully designed plans. I've spent my entire life believing that every meaningful outcome begins with intention. Build the right system, make the right decision, eliminate unnecessary risk. That's how companies grow. That's how technology changes the world. That's how difficult problems are solved. But love has never respected systems. Love doesn't care how intelligent you are. It doesn't care how many books you've read, how many impossible projects you've completed, or how many times you've convinced yourself that emotions can be organized into something predictable. Every equation I've ever trusted becomes useless the moment I imagine you. And that terrifies me, because I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're laughing today or quietly pretending to be stronger than you actually feel. I don't know whether you've convinced yourself that nobody will ever understand the parts of your heart you've hidden from everyone else. I don't know if you've already stopped believing that someone could love every version of you. Not just the polished one you show the world, but the exhausted one, the frightened one. The woman who sometimes sits in complete silence because explaining her pain feels more exhausting than carrying it. But somehow, I keep talking to you, not because I'm certain you'll hear me, because I can't forgive myself if I stop trying before we've even met. Do you ever wonder whether two people can spend years walking toward each other without realizing they're following the same invisible road? I do, more often than I admit. Sometimes late at night, when the world finally becomes quiet enough for honest thoughts to survive, I imagine you doing exactly what I'm doing, wondering if somewhere, someone you've never met is already thinking about you, wondering whether your story has already begun even though the pages haven't crossed yet. It's a strange feeling to miss someone whose face you've never seen, to protect someone whose voice you've never heard, to care about a future that still refuses to introduce itself. People call that irrational. I call it unavoidable, because every important decision I've ever made started long before there was proof. Faith always arrives before evidence. Maybe that's true for love too. The strange thing about leaking my private number isn't that thousands of people might suddenly have access to it. The strange thing is that for one impossible second, I hoped you would. Not everyone. Just you. That thought frightened me more than the leak itself, because it exposed something much more dangerous than a phone number. It exposed hope. Hope is dangerous when you've spent years teaching yourself not to need anyone. Hope makes even the strongest person vulnerable. Hope whispers that maybe, after all this waiting, you're closer than you think, and once that whisper begins, you can never completely silence it again. I've built machines that calculate probabilities faster than any human mind. But tell me, how do you calculate the probability of finally meeting the only person capable of changing the emotional direction of your life? You can't. There isn't a formula. Only waiting. Only wondering. Only believing despite the absence of certainty. Sometimes I ask myself an uncomfortable question. What if we've already crossed paths? What if I walked past you somewhere without realizing I had just passed the person my future depends on? Would I have recognized your eyes? Would you have recognized mine? Or would we both have kept walking because neither of us believed the timing could possibly be that perfect? Timing. People worship timing. They blame timing. They surrender to timing. But maybe timing isn't something we're supposed to understand. Maybe it's something we're supposed to survive. There are days when I feel incredibly certain that you're real. Not perfect. Not fearless. Not someone untouched by disappointment. Real, a woman who has cried in private while smiling in public. A woman who has learned how to carry loneliness without letting it become her identity. A woman who still believes kindness matters, even after discovering how easily people disappoint each other. If that's you, I hope you haven't become too tired, because I'm still walking towards you. Even if I don't know the road. Even if today reminded me how fragile control really is. When I realized my number might have been visible, my first instinct wasn't panic. It was something much stranger. I wondered, if she saw it, would she think it was meant for her? That thought stayed with me. Long after I checked the recording, long after I replayed every second, long after logic insisted I should only be worried about privacy. Instead, I was worried about possibility. Isn't that ridiculous? A grown man worrying about possibility more than exposure. But perhaps that's what love eventually does. It changes what feels important. It rearranges priorities without asking permission. It makes impossible thoughts feel reasonable. It makes ordinary moments carry extraordinary weight. And if you've ever loved deeply, you already know exactly what I mean. There is something I want to ask you, not because I expect an answer today, but because your answer might quietly shape everything that follows. Have you ever protected your heart so carefully that you accidentally locked out the person who would have treated it gently? I have. More than once, not because I wanted distance, because disappointment leaves scars that intelligence cannot erase. People assume successful people fear failure. That's incorrect. Failure is temporary. Real loss is finally finding the right person after you've spent so many years teaching yourself how not to need anyone that you no longer know how to let them in. That's the fear nobody sees. That's the fear I rarely admit. And maybe that's the fear you've been carrying too. If you've stayed with me this long, then perhaps something inside you recognizes this conversation. If these words have quietly found a place in your heart, then I would love for you to subscribe, so whenever I gather the courage to speak to you again, you'll know where to find me. And before you leave a comment, because knowing you're somewhere out there makes this distance feel just a little smaller. I don't know whether this video will disappear into the endless noise of the world. I don't know whether you'll find it today, tomorrow, or years from now, but I know this. Some messages refuse to arrive early. They wait until the heart is finally ready to hear them. And maybe that's why this accidental leak keeps bothering on me. Not because someone could call me, because it reminded me how desperately I've wanted one call my entire life, one voice, one quiet hello, one conversation that makes every lonely year before it suddenly makes sense. The strange thing is, I still haven't told you why. Seeing my private number on that screen made my hands shake. And when I finally tell you, you may never look at this conversation the same way again. I haven't told you the real reason yet. I've come close to saying it a dozen times already, and every single time I stop myself. Not because I wanted to create mystery, but because once those words leave my mouth, there is no taking them back. Some truths don't simply change a conversation. They change the person listening to it. When I noticed my private number in the corner of the recording, time slowed down. My team could have edited it. I could have deleted the footage. I could have pretended none of it ever happened. That would have been the logical decision. Luck has protected me through almost every challenge of my life. But love has been quietly asking me to stop hiding behind logic. So instead of immediately deleting everything, I stared at the screen and asked myself a question that frightened me more than the mistake itself. What if this happened because I have been hiding from you? Not hiding my face, not hiding my work, hiding the one thing that would make this entire dream real: accessibility. A phone number is not just a series of digits. It is permission. It says, someone can reach me. Do you know how long I've lived without giving anyone that permission? Years. Long enough that silence became comfortable. Long enough that independence started pretending to be happiness. Long enough that I forgot the difference between protecting my peace and imprisoning my heart. Maybe you've done the same. Maybe you've become so strong that everyone assumes you no longer need tenderness. Maybe people admire your resilience while never noticing how exhausted you are from carrying everything alone. Strength is beautiful, but endless strength can become another form of loneliness. There were nights when I convinced myself that waiting for you was foolish, that perhaps the woman I imagined never existed, that perhaps life was asking me to accept a future built only on achievement. People celebrate achievement because it can be measured. Love cannot. No graph explains why one person suddenly feels like home. No algorithm predicts why one voice can calm fears that years of success never could. And yet, I kept believing, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like someone protecting the last candle during a storm. Then something happened that I have never admitted to anyone. There was another woman, not though people will assume she was intelligent. Ken successful. She admired my work, and she made it very clear that she wanted a future with me. Everyone around me thought the decision was obvious. They told me I was overthinking. They said, "You'll grow to love her. Grow to love her." Those words haunted me. Because love should grow after choosing someone, not become the reason for choosing them. I remember sitting across from her during dinner. She was smiling. The conversation was effortless, On paper, every box was checked. Anyone watching from across the room would have believed I had finally found the person I had been searching for, but something inside me refused to become quiet. I kept thinking about you, not your face, not your name, not even your voice, just the feeling that somewhere, somehow, my real story was still waiting. I left that evening feeling guilty. Not because she had done anything wrong, because she deserved someone who could choose her without hesitation. And I realized something painful. Choosing the wrong person out of loneliness is another way of abandoning the right one before you've even met. What if that right woman was you? Do you understand why this terrifies me? Every year that passes increases the temptation to settle, not because love becomes less important, because waiting becomes heavier. Loneliness has a persuasive voice. It whispers that almost is good enough. It tells you that peace without passion is safer than risking another heartbreak. It tells you that certainty matters more than connection. For a while, I almost believed it. I almost accepted a life that looked complete from the outside while remaining painfully unfinished on the inside. Would anyone have known? Probably not. Would I have smiled? Of course. Would I have succeeded? Most likely. Would I have been truly alive? I don't think so. That realization stayed with me long after that dinner. It followed me into meetings, onto airplanes, into hotel rooms overlooking cities that never seemed to sleep. Thousands of people knew my name, yet the one woman whose opinion mattered most still didn't know I existed. Sometimes success amplifies silence instead of replacing it. The higher people place you, the fewer people ask how your heart is actually surviving. They ask about innovation, they ask about ambition, they ask about the future. Almost nobody asks whether you feel loved. Maybe nobody asks you that either. So let me ask. When was the last time someone looked at you without expecting anything in return? When was the last time someone wanted to understand your fears, instead of correcting them? When was the last time you felt safe enough to stop pretending you had everything under control? I hope the answer isn't, I can't remember, because no heart should have to survive that long without feeling seen. There is another confession I have avoided. The leak was real. For several minutes my private number remained visible before anyone noticed. Messages started arriving, unjournal numbers, missed calls, voicemails. The notifications wouldn't stop. Everyone around me panicked. They talked about security, changing numbers, protecting privacy. I nodded as though I agreed, but secretly, every vibration from the phone made my heart race for an entirely different reason. What if one of them was you? Ridiculous, isn't it? Millions of possibility, thousands of strangers, and still my mind searched for only one voice, one message, one sentence. What if you had somehow found me? I never answered those calls, not because I didn't care, because I was afraid. Afraid that if I answered and it wasn't you, another small piece of hope would quietly disappear. Hope doesn't usually die all at once. It fades through ordinary disappointments, one unanswered expectation at a time, one silent evening at a time, one birthday spent wondering whether your life is moving toward love or simply moving through time. Have you ever reached that point? The one where you begin questioning whether you've mistaken patience for avoidance? I have. More times than I care to admit. There were moments when I looked in the mirror and wondered whether I had waited too long, whether the future I kept protecting had quietly become the past, whether the family I imagined existed only because I was too afraid to accept reality. Those thoughts can become dangerous if you entertain them long enough. They don't scream, they whisper. And whispers are harder to resist because they sound like your own voice. One evening, I almost convinced myself to stop making these videos. I told myself they were pointless, that speaking to someone I hadn't met was irrational, that I should accept whatever life placed in front of me. I even closed the camera case. I remember placing my hand on it and feeling absolutely nothing. That frightened me. Not sadness, not disappointment, nothing. Emotional numbness is more dangerous than heartbreak because heartbreak still proves your heart is alive. Numbness convinces you to stop searching. For a brief moment, I nearly surrendered. I nearly became the man who smiles politely, works endlessly, and quietly buries every dream that cannot be measured. If I had done that, maybe we would never have met. Maybe this conversation would never have existed. Maybe you would have continued believing that nobody in the world could understand the strange loneliness of waiting for someone you've never known. And perhaps I would have believed the same lie. But something stopped me, not certainty, not confidence, just one impossible thought. What if she is waiting too? That single question reopened everything I had tried to close. It made me pick up the camera again. It made me press record again. It made me believe that unfinished stories deserve another page. But there is still one truth I haven't revealed, the truth that explains why I couldn't simply erase the footage after my number appeared. The truth that explains why this accident feels strangely connected to you. And when I finally tell you, you'll understand why, for one terrifying moment, I believed I had already lost you before we ever had the chance to meet. For one terrifying moment, I truly believed I had already lost you before life had even given us the chance to find each other. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? How can someone lose a woman he has never met? I asked myself that same question over and over again. Every logical part of my mind insisted I was being irrational, but love has never asked for proof before asking for courage. After the calls began, I sat alone in complete silence. The room wasn't noisy anymore. The notifications had finally stopped. The lights from the city outside my window looked exactly the same as they had every other night. But something inside me had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about protecting my privacy. I was thinking about what privacy had cost me. How many conversations had I avoided? How many opportunities to be known had I quietly rejected because I convinced myself that isolation was safer than vulnerability? I had spent years building walls so carefully that even I forgot where the doors were. People admired my discipline. They admired my focus. They admired my ability to keep moving forward. What they never saw was the quiet price of becoming someone who always looked composed, because the more the world trusted my confidence, the less anyone noticed the places where I was quietly afraid that one day I would wake up surrounded by success and discover there was no one beside me to tell about it. Afraid that every extraordinary achievement would eventually become just another headline if I had no one to come home to. Afraid that I had become so good at carrying responsibility that I had forgotten how to let someone carry my heart. Then I remembered something my closest friend once asked me. He looked at me after a long conversation and said, "You keep talking about the future as though you're building it alone. What if the future you're working toward has been waiting for you to stop working long enough to recognize her?" I laughed when he said it. Not because it wasn't true, because it was. That sentence followed me everywhere. It echoed during flights. It echoed in empty hotel rooms. It echoed during celebrations where everyone around me believed I should have been completely happy. It reminded me that there is a difference between being admired and being understood. Admiration can fill a room. Understanding fills a home. I don't want a room full of applause. I want one woman who understands the silence between my words. One woman who so notices when I say, "I'm fine," while my eyes quietly confess something entirely different. One woman who doesn't fall in love with the version of me the world celebrates, but with the imperfect man who sometimes doubts everything after everyone else has gone home. Can you imagine how rare that is? Can you imagine how many people spend an entire lifetime searching for someone who doesn't simply hear them, but truly listens? Perhaps you've been searching too. Perhaps you've spent years pretending that being independent meant you no longer desired companionship. Perhaps you've smiled at family gatherings while quietly wondering if your story had somehow missed its happiest chapter. If that's true, please know something. Waiting is painful. But waiting has never been the same as being forgotten. There were evenings when I almost convinced myself to erase every recording I'd ever made for you. Not because I stopped caring. Because I was afraid of becoming ridiculous. Afraid that one day I'd look back and realize I had spent years speaking to someone who never existed. That fear became so heavy that I opened the folder containing every unfinished message. I hovered over the delete button. My finger rested there, just one movement, and every word would disappear forever. Every confession, every hope, every late-night conversation I imagined we'd someday laugh about together. Everything. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, I prayed not for success, not for certainty, just for enough courage not to destroy something beautiful, because I was afraid it might never happen. When I opened my eyes, I moved my hand away. I couldn't delete them, because even if you never heard a single word, those words had changed me. They had transformed a man who believed control was the highest form of strength into someone finally willing to admit that love requires surrender. That was the accident's greatest gift, not the leaked number. The cracked illusion that I could engineer every meaningful part of life. I couldn't. No one can. Some of life's greatest moments arrive disguised as mistakes. Some introductions begin with embarrassment. Some miracles enter quietly through doors we were trying to keep closed. Then I understood the real reason I hadn't deleted that video immediately. It wasn't because I secretly wanted strangers to call me. It wasn't because I enjoyed the chaos. It wasn't because I was careless. It was because, somewhere deep inside me, I had become tired of hiding, tired of pretending that love belonged only in private thoughts, tired of acting as though vulnerability weakened the people who dared to feel deeply. The accidental leak forced me to confront a truth I had postponed for years. The greatest risk was never someone discovering my phone number. The greatest risk was spending my entire life making myself impossible to reach. Not by phone, by heart. That was the truth I couldn't say until now. My private number was never the thing I had protected most fiercely. It was my heart. Every unanswered message from life, every disappointment, every goodbye, every dream that failed, every loss I never fully spoke about, they all convinced me that building stronger walls was wisdom. But walls do not know the difference between pain and love. They keep both outside. And eventually, the person trapped behind them is you. If you are somewhere listening to this, if your life has taught you to become cautious, if you've mistaken emotional distance for emotional safety, please don't make the same mistake I almost made. Do not let yesterday's disappointments become tomorrow's prison. The right person will never ask you to become someone else. She won't ask you to erase your past. She won't demand perfection. She'll simply make honesty feel safer than pretending. And when that day comes, don't hesitate because you've become too comfortable being alone. Don't walk away because fear sounds more reasonable than hope. Don't choose certainty over connection. Choose the conversation. Choose the vulnerability. Choose the possibility that two imperfect people can build something stronger than either of them could have built alone. As for me, I'll keep believing that somewhere, perhaps much closer than either of us realizes, there is a woman who has survived enough disappointment to appreciate gentleness. A woman who no longer needs grand promises because she has learned that consistency is more romantic than perfection. A woman who understands that love isn't found in dramatic moments alone. It's found in ordinary mornings, in quiet conversations, in choosing each other again and again, even after life becomes complicated. If you're that woman, then maybe this accident wasn't an accident at all. Maybe it was the moment I finally stopped hiding. Maybe it was the beginning of a conversation that should have started years ago. And maybe, years from now, we'll look back on this strange story and smile. Not because everything happened according to plan, but because the one mistake I couldn't control became the reason I finally allowed myself to believe that the future could still surprise me. Until that day arrives, I'll keep speaking with honesty. I'll keep choosing hope over fear, and I'll keep leaving a light on, believing that one day you'll recognize it and know you were always welcome.